Alright, so Resident Evil 9 Requiem isn't quite out yet, but we've got a lot of information. So today we're rounding up all of the publicly available info, as well as a little bit of our own opinion and hands-on impressions. It's me, Jake, and we're here with 10 things you need to know about Resident Evil Requiem. Starting off at number 10, the obvious one, Leon is back, and there are 2 playable characters this time. So having Grace Ashcroft and Leon Kennedy in the game, it kind of feels like it brings us back to the classic 2-character format of the series, though instead of each character having their own separate campaign, this game instead splits up their playtime evenly throughout the story, similar to how they kind of did it in Resident Evil Revelations. Now, according to the game's director, Leon's sections of the game are going to be much more similar to Resident Evil 4, while new character Grace Ashcroft's segments will be way more like Resident Evil 7. With more closed-off environments, limited ammo, tight inventory, survival horror stuff, her segments are intended to be the real scary parts, while Leon gets the crazy fun, awesome side of Resident Evil. In terms of progression, in terms of how character switching works, from what we've seen so far, it seems like it's linear. You'll play through a big section as Leon, and then it'll jump to Grace. And mechanically, both players appear to do a lot of like the similar core base things. Leon and Grace can both crouch, they both have access to weapons, they can do stealth takedowns to a point, but then Leon is by default set to third-person view, while Grace's camera defaults to first-person. So in general, her gameplay seems slower and more deliberate and more favorable to that camera angle, while Leon is all about roundhouse kicking zombies, so third-person is best for him. Now, interestingly enough, their UIs seem to change a bit to accommodate their different playstyles. Leon's UI looks right out of Resident Evil 4 with a prominent health bar displayed on the screen at all times, while Grace's UI is extremely minimal, more like Resident Evil 7. It does look like this game wants to have it all, like really have its cake and eat it too. You know, the terror, the horror of Resident Evil 7, and the highly thrilling, awesome stuff from Resident Evil 4. So it's a lot to pack into one game. It's really ambitious, but so far from what we've seen, it looks promising. Now at number 9, into a little bit more speculation, this game might have some big open levels. In the earliest stages of development, Resident Evil Requiem was going to be an open world multiplayer game, according to the developers, but that concept was scrapped early on in favor of the game we've got now, which is more closer to a regular traditional Resident Evil. Still, there might still be some of that open world DNA left in the game if certain leakers are to be believed. Again, this is all pure speculation and rumors and stuff, take this all with a grain of salt, but apparently Requiem will feature some, quote, big open levels. To us, that kind of suggests that there could be some large, more like non-linear segments. I'm thinking something like the lake area in Resident Evil 4 Remake that let you go do a couple little things here and there. Something more on the level of that than like an open world level, but who knows? The speculation about an open world or an explorable area did go crazy after Nvidia released this trailer that showed Grace walking through a very dense and graphically gorgeous city street, which a lot of people kind of saw as a possible open world. For me personally, I really doubt that like a city with, you know, civilians and cars and everything is going to be a main gameplay thing for Resident Evil, let alone a Resident Evil open world thing. I feel like it's something you probably walk through as part of the story, but I don't expect that to be a big gameplay area where you're like killing dudes, but who knows? We could be wrong. If there are going to be any big levels, they're probably going to be set in the blown up remains of Raccoon City and the Raccoon City Police Department, which we are finally returning to after all these years because the first trailer revealed that. Having said that, we haven't seen a lot of actual gameplay moments in that area. So we're really excited to see like what actually happens there. Now at number 8, after the success of Resident Evil 7, we did get a few games with a first-person camera and then the remakes with a third-person camera, but like I said earlier, in this game, you do get both. So at any point, you can actually now switch between camera modes for either character. And this might sound like a minor thing, but your perspective actually does affect how the game is played. One prominent example seen in the gameplay demo that they put out is that when you play in third person, Grace will occasionally stumble when running away from enemies, which is something that does not actually happen when you're in first person. It's more of like an immersive animation thing. This was done to create more tension when playing in third person. And I guess since it's like lacking that immediate jump scare effectiveness when the camera's in your face, like the developers have compensated by adding some new little animations and things here to ramp up the tension. I don't know. So playing in first or third person isn't just a cosmetic change, it actually affects the gameplay in some noticeable ways, but they are still more under the hood ways to make it feel like a more natural first person game or a more natural third person game. Not one of those games where it's like you're playing in third person, but it really feels like it's designed like a first person game. And I think part of that comes down to the fact that like you can't just press a button and switch the camera on the fly. You actually have to go into the menu and manually switch the camera mode over in the options menu. It doesn't seem like there's a massive load time or anything like that. It's pretty quick, but that is a thing, and it's also worth noting that you can set defaults for these people. There's going to be a tab for Leon and a tab for Grace, and you can set the default camera perspective for them. So if you prefer to play in Leon as first person or something like that, you can have it switched on so that you play as Leon in first person for the whole game. The freedom of choice here, the options, is really cool. We don't see this in enough games, so I definitely commend them for this. Next at number 7, let's talk about the zombies, because it looks like we're back to the classic zombie style of the old games, but there's a little bit of a twist. Instead of just being completely mindless husks, the zombies in this game seem to actually retain some small aspect of their former selves. So, as shown in some of the trailers and stuff, instead of just standing around doing nothing, these guys continue to kind of do the things they did in real life. So, like, custodians will continue to wander around and clean. Now, watching them and kind of learning their behaviors seems important for Grace more than anything, because she needs to play more carefully compared to Leon because of, survival horror and limited resources. But either way, this change gives the zombies a really unpredictable edge that could make them more interesting. From our preview session, we saw a handful of different zombies. A big chef zombie that stomps around a certain area, a zombie just stuck flicking a light switch, and then if you switch a different light switch, you can kind of manipulate and trick that zombie as to where they go. A hospital patient looking zombie that seems even more sensitive to sound, where if you're sneaking around and you make sound, they'll freak out and run after you. As well as, like we mentioned before, a kind of cleaner or janitor style zombie that looks like she will actually seek out and find blood spots and clean them. Some of these zombies apparently can mutate into monsters, but we've only seen so much of that. We can't really speak to it. But in terms of like other enemy types, we don't know a lot about Requiem. We did see that big, tall, scary lady stalker from the first reveal of Grace's gameplay, but other than that, we don't really know too much. Next at number 6, we already talked about like the main differences between Leon and Grace, but Leon isn't just back to playing just like Resident Evil 4. He's actually got some new tricks. For one thing, he swapped out the knife for this big hatchet that can be used to parry attacks, just like the knife. But one thing that is different about it is that you no longer need to visit a shop to repair this thing. It can actually be fixed on the fly by pressing a button where he will then sharpen the axe. Now, melee prompts have returned, and the ability to incapacitate an enemy by, shooting them in the legs and performing a cool kick, that returns. That's like Resident Evil 101 at this point, but this time, there's more variety in the sorts of actions that he can perform. If a zombie is near a surface, he'll incorporate that into the finisher. And it looks like he's got special gun finishers too, like he can stick a gun in a zombie's face and blow their head off, for example. The way this seems to work is if a zombie is already low on health and you get really close to them and you press the shoot button, that'll trigger it. One of the more exciting things that definitely blew up the internet was seeing that Leon can pick up and use enemy weapons, including a chainsaw. This is something that we've wanted to see since Resident Evil 4 first happened. Like, if you're gonna make us fight chainsaw wielding guys, let us pick one up and use one ourselves. And picking up the chainsaw in our experience from our preview does feel pretty great. It is relatively simple, but essentially he can do a big spin hit with it, and it absolutely tears through zombies. It can also kind of save you if a zombie gets too close and tries to bite you. When that zombie leans in, Leon will like stab through that zombie with the chainsaw to repel them, pushing them away with the chainsaw stuck in the zombie's body. It's pretty crazy. From everything we've seen, it looks like they're taking the action-based combat even further than the Resident Evil 4 remake, and maybe even incorporating some of the ideas from Resident Evil 6, which for all its flaws, did have some cool stuff you could do as Leon. Honestly, we're just big fans of Leon here, and it's nice to see him be like the fully fleshed out badass that we know he is. Next at number 5, look, we talked about Leon a lot. He gets the fancy stuff, but there's still a lot of interesting things that have been revealed about how this new character Grace is gonna play. The early trailers focused on the RE7 style, kind of creeping around, hiding mechanics, and that does seem to be a major part of how you're gonna play as Grace, but the more recent showcase trailer, and from what we've seen, makes it clear that her gameplay style is very much in line with a regular regular old Resident Evil game. That means exploring dense buildings with limited ammo and limited inventory. She does have access to weapons, and you're gonna swap them on the D-pad like you do in these games, but she's less capable than Leon by design. She's not this like grizzled veteran or an over-the-top badass. But she's still an FBI agent. She can fire a weapon, but aiming and shooting is going to be a little bit more difficult by default. But she does have some special items and weapons to go in her favor, though. She has the Requiem gun that fills in the usual large caliber revolver with limited ammo type weapon slot. It is extremely powerful, but extremely limited ammo. So it's only really meant to be used in a pinch, but when you use it, it can blow a hole in like multiple zombies in front of you. It's nuts. Otherwise, Grace's gameplay sections seem to be sticking pretty close to a Resident Evil 7 or a Resident Evil Village feel and formula, where she's exploring complex, interconnected spaces, solving puzzles, strategically choosing which enemies to kill or maybe avoid, and picking up healing items, green herbs, combining them, all that stuff. There's still the limited inventory. There's also a tab for crafting, so again, you're crafting healing items, ammo, stuff like that. But there's also this new mechanic for Requiem that revolves around these specialized injectors you can get. Because next at number 4, probably the strangest new mechanic shown so far, Grace can absorb collected blood from dead enemies, which can then be used to craft injectors that have various functions. You can find buckets of blood in the environment as well as just blood from downed enemies, and you hold a button and she sucks up the blood with this thing. Now, the only one we've seen used so far is the hemolytic injector, if I'm saying that right, where you inject infected blood into a zombie, which makes them explode. Which might not sound that useful, but it permanently kills the zombie, so you have no chance of it like mutating or becoming a bigger thing, which tends to be a factor in Resident Evil games. By blowing the thing up completely, you take it out of the picture, and it kind of serves as a little bit of a stealth kill weapon. Even if it's not very stealthy, because they explode into blood that goes everywhere, you'll constantly have the option of sneaking up behind a zombie and injecting them with one of these things. But you're gonna wanna collect blood as much as possible, because not only are you making these injectors, which, you know, we've only seen a few examples of, but the blood also ties directly into the crafting system, like making bullets and stuff like that, which sounds weird to use blood for crafting, but I don't know, it's a new thing in the environment to pick up. Next at number 3, let's talk character upgrades, because in our preview, in our hands-on, we got to see a little bit of it. As Grace, exploring the environment, you can find these old coins. These old-timey collector coins take up a spot in your inventory, so you have to be strategic about grabbing them, but there are rooms with little cabinets that you can spend these coins on. They open up and they give you things. This is where you'll get access to an expanded inventory system, but also special injectors that you can unlock that Grace will inject herself with and improve her health, essentially increasing her health bar, as well as another one we unlocked that helps with Grace's aiming accuracy as well as the firepower behind the shots. So with a couple of upgrades, it becomes very clear that Grace isn't as ineffective as she was in that early game where she's being stalked by that giant thing. She's not just stumbling around. She can shoot, she can fire, but it kind of feels like she's on the same level as an Ethan Winters. In terms of Leon's upgrades, we didn't get to see too much of this except for gun upgrades. We found a few gun parts in the environment that we were able to equip to Leon's weapon, and pretty much in typical fashion, something we've seen in Resident Evil games before, but it was really cool to pick up a compensator and attach it to our pistol, just to give us some little extra gun bonuses. Now at number 2, new difficulty options. You know, these games generally stick to the classics when it comes to difficulty selections, but this new game does something a little different. There's the usual casual mode, which offers some aim assist for players who just want to experience the story and not have too much struggle, but instead of just having the usual normal difficulty, this game has 2 different variations kind of on the same thing. There's standard modern and standard classic. Both of them are like the intended difficulty, the normal difficulty, but if you play on classic, then there are fewer autosaves when playing as Grace. And if you want to save the game, then you'll need to use an ink ribbon to do so. They describe this mode as being more challenging in line with the old games. But if you actually played those old games, ink ribbons are pretty manageable. You might be used to that whole system. They're usually around, and even if you saved fairly frequently, you're not usually in danger of running out. So I'm just curious to see how Requiem will pace that. Will it be the same way, or are they gonna really limit those ink ribbons and make your life a living hell? Curious to see how it goes. Is standard difficulty set to classic actually a harder way to play, or if it's just a slight change? The modern version of standard difficulty is basically just the same thing, only without ink ribbons and more autosaves. So it's really just a decision whether you cannot handle limited saves or not. It's good that the game is giving players options, but I can't help but wonder how the classic mode is balanced, you know? Depending on how infrequent save points are, it could end up being a lot harder, or it might not be a big deal. I just don't know until we actually get our hands on the full entire game. But still, it's interesting, and I'm glad they're trying to accommodate new and old players. Now down at number 1, Resident Evil 9 is launching February 27th. There's the usual deluxe editions and the pre-order bonuses, but nothing too crazy. They're not offering any early access schemes or anything like that. One other thing worth mentioning, just for housekeeping here, is what systems the game will be available for. There's the usual stuff, you know, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Steam, Epic Game Stores, GeForce Now, but also the Nintendo Switch 2. If you missed the news, yeah, this is coming to the Switch 2 day and date. Now, we can't comment on performance, we haven't seen anything, but I'm curious to see how it goes. It's another game key card thing, so be aware of that, but it looks like the game might shape up to be a good Switch 2 port. We won't know for sure until we actually play it, but wherever we play it, from Switch 2 to PC, I just hope this thing runs well. But that's it. Those are 10 things you need to know about Resident Evil Requiem. It's not too far off now, so let us know in the comments what you think. I'm sure there's tons of story speculation. We didn't really want to go into that too much, but I'm incredibly excited to see what actually goes down here. Let us know what you think about Resident Evil 9, anything at all, down in the comments. If you like this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed the information gathering here, but we make videos every day, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.